in fact, the process of the rest country. I mean, because you mentioned the West and the rest, right? So all the process of the rest country developing their own development model can be seen as de-Americanization. Because as we all know, for the past half century, most of the countries' modernization process have been modeled after the United States. The late Harvard professor Samuel Huntington, we all know him, argued many years ago. He wrote a book. He said, since the 1970s, human political development model have entered a third wave, right? And another very famous professor, Francis Fukuyama, he spoke of about the end of history. Both of them referring to the convergence of the many countries' model towards the American development model. Of course, we admire the American, we worship American development model. But the problem is that in the 2008 international financial crisis, as you mentioned, especially since Trump took office in 2017, people in the world have been re-evaluating their development paths and readjusting their relationship with the United States. For example, emerging economies such as Russia, Brazil, India, Indonesia are all re-examining their national development positioning and identity. These countries are seeking to defend their national security and pursue their own development paths in areas such as political development model, economic market mechanism, financial instruments, and military security system. I think China is no exception. First, China must ensure the security of its political system. China does not want to repeat the patterns of Soviet Union collapse. China will not allow the United States to instigate a color revolution in China. Over the past 20 years, many countries in the world have experienced color revolution linked to the United States. Secondly, China must also ensure its economic trade and financial autonomy, as we mentioned, preventing the United States from controlling China economic lifeline. In fact, many country economy are controlled by the United States due to the excessive dependence on it, especially some country in Latin America. So these can be called new colonization, new colonialism. Thirdly, I think China must pursue its own technological and military security. China must prevent the U.S. from stifling its technological and military development and threatening it in the long term. And also, China has to promote our reunification, right? We have to solve the Taiwan issues in the coming years. And finally, China must have its own independent knowledge and ideology system to prevent being colonized by the American ideology and knowledge. And of course, this Americanization process does not mean a completely decoupling from the United States, but rather we find a normal relationship with the US, neither completely dependent on the US, none avoiding necessary cooperation. I can give you a very interesting example. I don't know whether it is right. I said in the past, China and the US relationship were like those of close lovers, especially in 1980 or 2000, after the September 11 happened. China supports, U.S. anti-terrorism war, and we have a very good relationship. And even in 2008, and Beijing Olympic game, U.S. president come to Beijing and celebrate with China president for the Beijing Olympic game, right? That's a very good relationship many years ago, like a close lover. But in the future, I hope that China-US relationship will be like those of normal neighbors. Neighbors sometimes have some kind of a conflict, but they also interact. And when faced with common difficulties, they help each other. So I think, but the bottom line is that the military conflict between U.S. and China must be avoided at all costs, as it would benefit no one. So I think that in the future, the U.S. and China relationship will be back to a normal relationship.
Yeah, I like that analogy. You hear it often in political science, the marriage to neighbor analogy, because, well, it's a good analogy. I like it because often, especially with great powers, if they might be too close to each other, it could create too many tensions to the point it doesn't work anymore. But if they get some distance from each other, then it's they're unable to live as a married couple, but they're able to be good neighbors, and then often this divorce without the coupling is quite favorable. And I think for great powers like China and the US, where there will always be some suspicion, but no one gains from open hostilities, that it's better to have a bit of a de-Americanization. Well, you can say the Russians are doing the same now. They want to the whole goal of being in a common Europe with Europeans. It's I think it caused too many tensions, so they see now that a divorce is better, to rather try to be neighbors instead of aspiring for something more. Just on the color revolution, so I think this is an important part of what de-Americanization should mean, because the color revolutions, they created a lot of problems around the world, especially in Europe. I mean, and it's done very openly as well. It's not as if it's a conspiracy theory what they're doing. And it's a very creepy model as well, because what the Americans have done is said that democracy has to include a strong element, or a strong civil society, that is a society capable of organizing itself independent from the government, which is also fair enough. But then they say, well, those who should organize civil society are NGOs. More specifically, they should be American NGOs. Being even more specifically, it should be state-financed NGOs. So these are NGOs financed by the US government, linked to US intelligence agencies, who for some reason should organize Chinese civil society. I mean, this is crazy stuff. I mean, if the Chinese government should, in cooperation with its intelligence services, should organize civil society in America, I can imagine there being some pushback. And indeed, the evidence is already there. In 1983, this is when President Reagan and the director of the CIA began to set up these NGOs, like the National Endowment for Democracy, as a way of manipulating and controlling the civil society of other countries. So you don't have to conquer countries with military; you can just take over their civil society. This is, it's a massive problem. It's one of the reasons why we have war in Europe now as well.